The massive ships hung in space like dark mountains against the stars. Each Kethmori dreadnought stretched 15 kilometers from bow to stern, their black hulls covered in weapon ports that could destroy planets. Supreme Admiral Zekthar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the mining world Kepler 442b turn slowly below them. "Report," he commanded in his deep, growling voice. "The humans are meeting their quotas, Supreme Admiral," replied his aide, a smaller Kethmori with nervous eyes. 17,000 tons of refined metals this cycle. The other slave species are also performing adequately. Zekthar nodded. The humans had been useful since their capture 50 years ago. They were weak compared to the mighty Kethmori, but they learned quickly and worked hard when properly motivated. Fear was an excellent teacher. The Kethmori Empire had ruled 12 star systems for 300 years. 17 different alien species bowed before their military might. Their fleets were unstoppable. Their weapons were the most advanced in the galaxy. Every battle they fought ended the same way, with their enemies burning in the void of space. "Sir," called the communications officer from his station, "we're detecting some unusual energy readings from the outer system." "What kind of readings?" Zekthar asked, not bothering to turn around. "Unknown, sir. The sensors show brief spikes near the gas giant, but they fade quickly. Could be natural phenomena." The Supreme Admiral waved a clawed hand dismissively, probably solar flares reflecting off the planet's magnetic field. "Continue monitoring, but do not waste my time with ghost signals." Down on the planet's surface, the human slaves worked in the deep mines. The air was thick with dust, and the constant sound of machinery. Guards in powered armor watched from elevated platforms, their weapons always ready. The humans had tried to rebel once 10 years ago. The Kethmori response had been swift and brutal. An entire city had been reduced to ash as a lesson to the others. Marcus Williams wiped sweat from his forehead as he loaded another cart with ore. His back ached from years of this work, but he had learned not to complain. Complaints led to beatings. Beatings led to death. "Keep moving," growled one of the guards through his armor's speaker. The mechanical voice echoed through the tunnels. Marcus nodded and pushed his cart toward the processing station. As he walked, he thought about his daughter Sarah. She would be 25 now if she was still alive. The Kethmori had taken her when she was 15, claiming she showed promise as a technician. He had not seen her since. Above them all, in the cold vacuum of space, something moved in the shadows between worlds. It had been watching for weeks, recording everything. The ships, the weapons, the patrol patterns, the communication frequencies. Every detail was carefully noted and transmitted across the vast distances between stars. Back on the flagship, Zekthar reviewed the latest reports from across the Empire. The outer colonies were quiet. The tribute fleets were running on schedule. Several species had attempted small rebellions in the past month, but they had been crushed without difficulty. The Vectar had tried to hide their weapons factories on an asteroid base. The base was now a field of debris. The insect-like Zithron had refused to increase their food production quotas. Half their population was now dead from orbital bombardment. This was how the Empire maintained order. Swift punishment. Total victory. No mercy for those who challenged Kethmori authority. "Supreme Admiral," the communications officer spoke again. "The Emperor is requesting a status report." Zekthar straightened. Emperor Thekmor ruled the Empire from the throne world, but he rarely contacted field commanders directly. "Put him through." The main screen flickered to life, showing the massive form of the Emperor. Thekmori were already large, but Thekmor was gigantic even by their standards. His scarred hide spoke of countless battles, and his eyes burned with the fire that had conquered a dozen worlds. "My Admiral," the Emperor's voice boomed through the bridge speakers. "How proceed our holdings in the Outer Rim?" "All is well, my Emperor. The slaves work efficiently. The tribute flows freely. Our enemies cower in fear as they should." "Good. I have received disturbing reports from our intelligence networks. Rumors of increased human activity in the unexplored regions beyond our borders," Zekthar felt a moment of confusion. Human activity, my emperor? The humans are a primitive species. We conquered their colonies easily. They have no ships capable of interstellar travel. Perhaps. But our spies report strange signals from the direction of their home system. Energy signatures that do not match any known technology. Shall I dispatch a scout fleet to investigate? The Emperor was quiet for several seconds. Not yet. Continue your current mission. But be alert. The humans may be more resourceful than we initially believed. The transmission ended, leaving Zekthar staring at the dark screen. Humans resourceful? The idea was almost laughable. He had seen their colonies burn. He had watched their pathetic ships die under Kethmori firepower. They were no threat to the Empire. Still, the Emperor's words troubled him. Thekmor did not worry about nothing. Sir, the sensor operator called out. Those energy readings are back, stronger this time. Location? Near the fourth moon of the gas giant. The signals are strange, sir. They don't match anything in our databases. Zekthar moved to the sensor station and studied the displays. The readings showed brief but intense energy spikes appearing and disappearing in seconds. The patterns were unlike anything he had seen before. Could be a new type of stellar phenomenon, suggested his science officer. The system is young. Many unexplained energies are common in such regions. Perhaps. Continue monitoring. Alert me if the readings change or move closer to our position. Hours passed. The fleet maintained its orbit while the slaves below continued their endless work. The sensors detected several more energy spikes, but they remained distant and brief. Zekthar began to relax. Whatever was causing the readings, it posed no immediate threat. He was wrong. In the darkness between worlds, the Watcher finished its work. Every detail of the Kethmori fleet had been recorded. Their shield frequencies, weapon signatures, structural weak points, communication protocols. The data flowed across space at faster than light speeds, reaching receivers that waited in the void. The message was simple. Target acquired, analysis complete, awaiting orders. The response came within minutes. Understood. Begin Phase 2. Diplomatic contact in 72 hours. On his bridge, Zekthar felt a strange unease. The energy readings had stopped completely. The sensors showed nothing unusual. Everything appeared normal. But something had changed. He could feel it in the air, in the silence of space around them. The Empire had ruled through fear and superior firepower for 3 centuries. No enemy had ever challenged them successfully. No species had ever posed a real threat to their dominance. That was about to change. Far away, in the cold depths of space, engines began to warm. Weapon systems came online. Ship after ship received the same message. Prepare for deployment. The humans are going to war. The Kethmori Empire had ruled the galaxy through terror and overwhelming force. They believed themselves invincible. They believed no species could match their military might. They were about to discover how wrong they were. The ship appeared without warning. One moment, the space around Kepler 442b was empty except for the Kethmori fleet. The next moment, a sleek vessel materialized from hyperspace, its hull gleaming silver against the starfield. "Contact!" shouted the sensor operator on Zekthar's flagship. Unknown vessel bearing 27 Mark IV. Distance 50,000 kilometers. Zekthar moved quickly to the tactical display. The new ship was small compared to his dreadnoughts, maybe 800 meters long. Its design was unlike anything in the Kethmori databases. Clean lines, no visible weapons, minimal sensor signature. "Sir, the vessel is broadcasting on all frequencies," reported the communications officer. "What are they saying?" It's in the human language, sir. Standard Earth dialect." A chill ran down Zekthar's spine. "Put it through." The voice that filled the bridge was calm, professional, and completely unafraid. "This is Captain Elena Rodriguez of the Terran Federation Navy vessel Hermes. You are hereby ordered to cease all hostile actions against human colonies and prepare for immediate negotiations regarding the release of all human prisoners." The bridge fell silent. For several seconds, no one spoke. Then Zekthar began to laugh. It started as a low chuckle and grew into a full-throated roar that echoed through the command center. "Did this human just order us?" he gasped between laughs. "Did she just demand that we negotiate?" His officers joined in the laughter. The idea was absurd. One small human ship against a full Kethmori battle fleet. It was like an insect challenging a giant. "Scan that ship," Zekthar ordered. "I want to know everything about it." The sensor technician worked his controls rapidly. "Sir, the scans are unusual. The ship's hull appears to be made of some unknown alloy. Energy readings are minimal, but there are strange quantum fluctuations around the vessel. Weapons? None visible, sir. But the hull configuration suggests internal weapon bays." Zekthar opened a communication channel. "Human vessel. This is Supreme Admiral Zekthar of the Kethmori Imperial Navy. You will surrender immediately and prepare to be boarded. Your crew will be taken as slaves. Your ship will be added to our fleet." The response came immediately, in the same calm voice. "Admiral Zekthar, you have 1 hour to comply with our demands. Release all human prisoners and withdraw your forces from this system. Failure to comply will result in the complete destruction of your fleet." The laughter on the bridge grew louder. Several officers were holding their sides, tears streaming from their eyes. "Complete destruction?" Zekthar wheezed. "One ship against 47 dreadnoughts? The humans have become insane in their desperation." He opened the channel again. "Little human, you have exactly 60 seconds to surrender before I turn your pathetic ship into scrap metal. This is your only warning." "Admiral," Captain Rodriguez replied, "you misunderstand the situation. This is not a threat. This is a notification. You have 59 minutes and 30 seconds remaining." The communication cut off. Zekthar shook his head. "Target that ship. Prepare to fire on my command." "Sir," the tactical officer reported, "all weapons are locked on target. The human vessel shows no signs of raising shields or powering weapons." "They're probably too primitive to have proper shields," another officer commented. "This will be over quickly." But before Zekthar could give the order to fire, something strange happened. The human ship launched a single small object, no bigger than a probe. The tiny device moved with impossible speed, darting between the Kethmori ships like a living thing. "What is that?" Zekthar demanded. "Unknown, sir. It appears to be some kind of advanced probe. It's scanning our ships. Shoot it down." Weapon turrets across the fleet swiveled to track the probe, but it was too fast. It moved in patterns that seemed to predict where the Kethmori would aim, always staying one step ahead of their targeting computers. "Sir, the probe is transmitting," the communications officer announced. "What kind of transmission?" "Data burst, sir. Extremely complex. It's sending information about our ships, shield frequencies, weapon signatures, structural analysis, crew complements. The transmission it's incredibly detailed." Zekthar felt a knot form in his stomach. "Block the transmission." "We're trying, sir, but the signal is unlike anything we've encountered. It's using quantum encryption methods that our systems can't decode or jam." "Where is it transmitting to?" "Unknown, sir. The signal appears to be bouncing through multiple relay points across several star systems. We cannot trace the final destination." The probe continued its dance between the ships for several more minutes, gathering information and transmitting it to unknown receivers. Finally, it stopped moving and simply hung in space. "Sir, the probe has gone dormant," the sensor operator reported. "Destroy it." A single pulse from a plasma cannon vaporized the probe instantly, but the damage was done. Whatever information it had gathered was already on its way to the human fleet. "Sir," the communications officer spoke up nervously, "we're receiving another transmission from the human ship. Put it through." Captain Rodriguez's voice was as calm as before. "Thank you for your cooperation, Admiral. The reconnaissance data has been transmitted successfully. You now have 47 minutes to comply with our demands." "Reconnaissance data?" Zekthar snarled. "What reconnaissance data?" "Complete tactical analysis of your fleet. Ship specifications, weapon capabilities, shield harmonics, Crew layouts, structural weak points, standard pre-engagement intelligence gathering. The Admiral felt ice forming in his veins. Pre-engagement? Admiral, I should inform you that you are currently surrounded by the advance elements of the Terran Federation. Navy, we've been tracking your fleet for the past 6 weeks. Every ship, every weapon, every tactical formation has been analyzed and cataloged. Zekthar looked at his sensor displays. They showed nothing but empty space around the human courier ship. You're lying. Our sensors detect no other vessels. Your sensors are designed to detect Kethmori technology and known alien configurations. They are not equipped to detect ships using quantum stealth systems. Impossible. Admiral, you have 43 minutes remaining. I strongly advise you to use this time to evacuate the human prisoners from the planet's surface. When the deadline expires, there will be no further opportunities for negotiation. The channel closed again. Zekthar stared at the tactical display, his mind racing. It had to be a bluff. Humans didn't have stealth technology. They didn't have advanced weapons. They were a primitive species that had been easily conquered. But the probe had been real. Its ability to evade their weapons had been real. The detailed scans it had performed were far beyond anything in the Kethmori technical databases. Sir, his aide approached cautiously. Perhaps we should contact the Emperor. No. Zekthar's voice was firm. This is clearly a desperate gamble by a dying species. One human ship cannot threaten the entire Kethmori fleet. We will show them what happens to those who challenge the Empire. He opened a fleet-wide communication channel. All ships, battle stations, target the human vessel, prepare for coordinated assault. Across the fleet, massive dreadnoughts powered up their weapons. Plasma cannons charged, missile tubes loaded, shield generators hummed to full power. Sir, all ships report ready, the tactical officer announced. Zekthar looked at the small human ship on his screen. It hung there peacefully, showing no signs of fear or preparation for battle. Fire. 47 dreadnoughts opened fire simultaneously. The space around the human ship erupted in a storm of energy that could have destroyed a small moon. Plasma bolts, particle beams, and quantum torpedoes converged on a single point. When the energy discharge cleared, the space where the human ship had been was empty. For a moment, Zekthar thought they had succeeded. Then the sensor operator called out in a shaking voice, Sir, the human ship is still there. It's completely undamaged. On the screen, the silver vessel sat exactly where it had been before the attack. Not a single mark marred its hull. Its energy readings were actually higher than before. Impossible, Zekthar whispered. Captain Rodriguez's voice filled the bridge one more time. Admiral, you have 38 minutes remaining. I suggest you use them wisely. The communication ended, leaving the Kethmori fleet staring at a ship that should have been destroyed, but instead seemed to have grown stronger from their attack. The space around Kepler 442b rippled like water. Reality seemed to bend and twist as something massive pushed through the fabric of hyperspace. Energy readings spiked across every sensor in the Kethmori fleet. Emergency alarms began to wail. Then, it appeared. The Terran Battleship Yamato emerged from hyperspace in complete silence, its dark hull absorbing the light of distant stars. At 2 kilometers long, it was small compared to the Kethmori dreadnoughts, but something about it made every warrior on every bridge feel a chill of primal fear. New contact, shouted the sensor operator on Zekthar's flagship, his voice cracking with terror. Massive vessel directly ahead, distance 30,000 kilometers. Zekthar stared at the tactical display. The human ship was unlike anything he had ever seen. Its hull was smooth and featureless, with no visible weapons or sensor arrays. It looked more like a piece of living shadow than a warship. Sir, the communications officer called out, we're receiving a transmission from the new vessel. Put it through. A woman's voice filled the bridge, calm and cold as deep space. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Federation Navy, commanding the battleship Yamato. Supreme Admiral Zekthar, you had your chance for peaceful resolution. This is the consequence of your choice. Zekthar found his voice. Human, You are outnumbered 47-1. Your single ship cannot stand against the might of the Kethmori Empire. Surrender now and I will make your death quick. Admiral, came the reply. You misunderstand. This is not a battle. This is an execution. The channel closed. Zekthar snarled and opened fleet communications. All ships, combat formation Delta 7, concentrate all fire on the human battleship. Show these primitives what happens when they challenge the Empire. The Kethmori fleet moved with practiced precision. 47 dreadnoughts arranged themselves in a perfect sphere around the lone human vessel. Every weapon in the fleet locked onto the target. Enough firepower to destroy continents focused on a single point in space. All ships report ready, sir, announced the tactical officer. Fire everything. The void erupted in light. Plasma cannons discharged their fury. Particle beams lanced through space. Quantum torpedoes streaked toward their target. The combined firepower of the entire Kethmori fleet converged on the human ship in a display of destruction that lit up half the star system. The attack continued for a full minute. Every weapon fired until their energy cells were drained. The space around the human ship became a miniature star, burning with the heat of 1,000 suns. When the barrage finally ended, Zekthar leaned forward in his command chair, waiting for the energy to dissipate so he could see the wreckage. The tactical display cleared. The human ship sat exactly where it had been, completely undamaged. Impossible, breathed the tactical officer. That much firepower should have vaporized anything. Sir, the sensor operator's voice was barely a whisper. The human ship's energy readings are off the scale. It's like our attack made it stronger. On the screen, the Yamato began to move. It turned slowly, almost lazily, until it faced the nearest Kethmori dreadnought. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the human ship opened fire. There was no flash of light, no visible beam. Space simply twisted. The Kethmori dreadnought, 15 kilometers of the finest military engineering the Empire could produce, folded in on itself like paper. In seconds, it compressed into a sphere barely 100 meters across, then vanished completely. Silence filled every bridge in the fleet. What happened to the Destroyer of Worlds? Someone whispered over the communications channel. Before anyone could answer, the Yamato fired again. Another dreadnought simply ceased to exist. Then another. And another. All ships scatter formation, Zekthar screamed. Evasive maneuvers. The massive Kethmori ships tried to flee, but they were too slow. The Yamato moved between them like a predator among prey, its impossible weapons reaching out to claim ship after ship. Each shot was precise, surgical, no wasted energy, no unnecessary destruction. Sir, the human ship is using some kind of quantum disruption technology, the science officer reported, his voice shaking. It's collapsing the molecular bonds of our ship's hulls. Our armor is useless against it. A new type of weapon emerged from the Yamato's hull. Sleek missiles that phased through space like ghosts, passing through the Kethmori shields as if they weren't there. They struck the dreadnoughts from within, detonating inside the ship's cores. Explosions bloomed like flowers as reactor containment failed. Return fire, Zekthar ordered desperately. All ships return fire. The remaining vessels turned their weapons on the human battleship again, pouring everything they had into focused attacks. The Yamato's shields absorbed the energy without effort, converting it into power for its own systems. Then the human ship began to move faster. It accelerated to impossible speeds, weaving between the Kethmori vessels like a fighter craft, despite its massive size. Directed energy beams lanced out from hidden ports, slicing through dreadnought hulls like knives through cloth. Each beam was perfectly controlled, cutting exactly where it needed to disable the target without destroying the crew quarters. They're aiming for our engines and weapons, reported the tactical officer. They're trying to disable us, not destroy us. Zekthar couldn't believe what he was seeing. The humans had the power to annihilate his entire fleet, but they were showing restraint. Even in the midst of battle, they were trying to minimize casualties. It was terrifying. Within 15 minutes, 32 dreadnoughts were either destroyed or drifting powerless. The remaining 15 ships found themselves completely surrounded by a single human vessel that seemed to be everywhere at once. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "the human admiral is hailing us." "Put her through." Admiral Chen's voice was as calm as ever. "Supreme Admiral Zekthar, you have 15 ships remaining. Your weapons are ineffective against our technology. Your ships cannot escape. I am offering you one final chance to surrender." Zekthar looked around his bridge. His officers stared at their displays in shock and terror. The most powerful fleet in the known galaxy had been reduced to scrap metal by a single enemy ship. What are your terms?" he asked. "Unconditional surrender of all remaining vessels. Immediate release of all prisoners on the planet below. Complete cessation of hostile actions against all human colonies. In return, your crews will be treated according to the standards of civilized warfare. And if I refuse, then you will share the fate of your other ships." Zekthar closed his eyes. 300 years of imperial dominance ended in 17 minutes by creatures they had dismissed as primitive animals. He began. "Sir," his aide whispered urgently, "the crew is waiting for your orders." The Supreme Admiral opened his eyes and looked at the tactical display. 15 ships against one. But that one ship had just proven that numbers meant nothing against superior technology and tactics. He thought about the Emperor, about the glory of the Empire, about the pride of the Kethmori people. Then he thought about the thousands of crew members under his command, warriors who deserved to live even if their admiral had failed them. "I surrender," he said quietly. The words seemed to echo through the bridge like a death knell. "Acknowledged," Admiral Chen replied. "All Kethmori vessels will power down their weapons and prepare to be boarded. Any attempt to resist will result in immediate destruction." One by one, the remaining dreadnoughts shut down their weapon systems. The pride of the Kethmori Empire, the fleet that had conquered 17 species and ruled 12 star systems, hung defenseless in space. On the planet below, human prisoners who had worked in the mines for 50 years looked up at the sky as Kethmori shuttles began landing near the prison compounds. Guards who had beaten them for decades now approached with hands raised in surrender. Marcus Williams stood in the mine entrance, hardly daring to believe what he was seeing. After half a century of slavery, freedom had come at last. Above them, all the Yamato hung in space like a dark angel, its presence a promise that the age of Kethmori dominance was over. The Empire had fallen in a single battle, brought down not by superior numbers or overwhelming force, but by the one thing they had never encountered in 3 centuries of conquest, an enemy that was simply better than they were. The news spread through the Kethmori Empire like wildfire. On the throne world of Kethmor Prime, Emperor Thekmor sat in his massive command chamber, staring at the holographic display that showed the impossible defeat at Kepler 442b. The transmission had arrived just hours ago, but already the effects were being felt across all 12 star systems. "Repeat the report," he commanded in a voice that shook the walls. His intelligence chief, a scarred veteran named Vekmar, stepped forward with obvious reluctance. "My Emperor, Supreme Admiral Zekthar's fleet engaged a single human battleship. The engagement lasted 17 minutes. 32 dreadnoughts were destroyed, 15 surrendered. The remaining human prisoners have been freed." "One ship," the Emperor said slowly. "One human ship destroyed the greatest fleet in our navy." "Yes, my Emperor." Thekmor rose from his throne, his massive form towering over the assembled officials. "How is this possible? The humans are primitives. We conquered their colonies with ease. They had no advanced technology." "My Emperor," Vekmar continued nervously, "the reports indicate that the human vessel used weapons and defense systems far beyond our current understanding. Their technology appears to be several generations ahead of our own." Before the Emperor could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the chamber. An aide rushed in, his face pale with terror. "My Emperor, we're receiving reports from across the Empire. Multiple systems are declaring independence. The slave species are in open revolt." The holographic display changed, showing a map of the Empire. Red warning lights were appearing on world after world as the news of the defeat spread. On Vector 7th, the insectoid population had overwhelmed their Keth Mori garrison and seized control of the orbital defense platforms. On Zithron, the amphibious natives had declared their independence and were broadcasting messages of freedom across their system. On dozen of other worlds, similar uprisings were beginning. "They think we are weak," growled the Emperor. "They think one defeat means the Empire is finished." "My Emperor," his military advisor spoke up, "perhaps we should negotiate with the humans. If their technology is truly superior." "Negotiate?" Thekmor's roar made everyone in the chamber step back. "The Kethamori Empire does not negotiate with inferior species. We crush them." But even as he spoke, more reports were flooding in. The garrison at Vector had fallen. 3 outer rim colonies had stopped sending tribute. Supply convoys were being attacked by freed slave ships. The careful balance of fear that had held the Empire together for 3 centuries was crumbling. Meanwhile, in the deep space beyond the Empire's borders, the human liberation fleet was already moving. 12 ships, each smaller than a Kethmori dreadnought but infinitely more advanced, split up to target different systems. Their mission was simple: free every human colony and offer protection to any species that wanted to throw off Kethmori. The first liberation came at New Shanghai, a mining colony in the Rigel system. The local Kethmori commander, having heard about the defeat at Kepler 442b, surrendered immediately when the human battleship Bismarck appeared in orbit. The human prisoners were freed without a shot being fired. At the Altair system, things went differently. The Kethmori governor was a hardliner who refused to believe that one species could defeat the Empire. He ordered his fleet to attack the approaching human vessel, the battleship Nelson. The battle lasted 8 minutes. When it was over, the Kethmori fleet was debris, and the Nelson was broadcasting the engagement to every receiver in the system. The message was clear: resistance was futile, but the humans did something unexpected. Instead of simply freeing their own people and leaving, they stayed. They offered protection to the other alien species in each system. They shared medical, supplies, and technology. They helped establish new governments based on cooperation rather than domination. Back on Kethmor Prime, Emperor Thekmor watched his empire disintegrate in real time. Each hour brought new reports of defeats, surrenders, and defections. Entire fleets were abandoning their posts rather than face the humans in battle. "My Emperor," his aide approached cautiously. "Admiral Dekmor is requesting permission to withdraw. The Third Fleet from the Vega sector. He reports that 3 human ships are approaching and he does not believe he can defeat them." 3 ships against an entire fleet? The Emperor snarled. "Has he lost his mind?" "Sir." Admiral Dekmor was present at the Altair engagement. He saw what the human weapons could do. The holographic display showed the approach of the human ships. As Thekmor watched, the Third Fleet began to scatter, individual ships fleeing in all directions rather than engage the enemy. "Cowards," he whispered. "They are all cowards." But it wasn't cowardice. It was simple mathematics. The humans had proven that their technology was so superior that numbers meant nothing. Fighting them wasn't bravery, it was suicide. On the former, slave world of Kepler 442b, Marcus Williams stood in the sunlight for the first time in 50 years without chains. Around him, thousands of other freed humans were boarding transport ships that would take them to safety. But many were choosing to stay, to help rebuild the world that had been their prison. Admiral Chen stood nearby, watching the evacuation with satisfaction. The Yamato hung in orbit above them, its presence a guarantee that no Kethmori ship would threaten this world again. "Admiral," Captain Rodriguez approached from the shuttle landing pad. "We're receiving surrender offers from 17 different systems. The local governors are offering to free all human prisoners in exchange for protection from their own populations." Chen nodded. "The slave species are rising up everywhere. They've been waiting 3 centuries for this moment." It was true. Across the Empire, the news of human victory had given hope to species that had almost forgotten what freedom meant. The Vectar were seizing Kethmori bases with captured weapons. The Zithron were coordinating their rebellion across multiple star systems using communication networks they had secretly maintained for decades. The crystalline beings of Sigma Draconis had simply vanished, taking their entire civilization underground where the Kethmori could not follow. On Kethmor Prime, the situation was becoming desperate. Emperor Thekmor's own palace guard was showing signs of unrest. Reports were coming in that some Kethmori commanders were negotiating separate peace agreements with human forces. The Empire was not just losing territory, it was losing its will to fight. "My Emperor," Vekmar approached with another report. "The humans have broadcast a message to all systems in the Empire." "What kind of message?" "A surrender offer, sir. They are requesting that you personally negotiate an end to hostilities." The Emperor stood silent for long moments. Around him, his advisors waited nervously. The great chamber felt empty now, with half the staff having fled in the past day. "They want me to surrender," he said finally. "The humans want the Emperor of the Kethmori to bow before them." "My Emperor," his aide said carefully, "perhaps it would be wise to consider their offer. Our fleets are scattered, our subject worlds are in revolt. We cannot fight an enemy whose weapons we cannot match." Thekmor turned to look at the holographic display one more time. Red lights covered most of the Empire now. Only a handful of core worlds remained under Kethmori control, and even those were reporting unrest among the population. 300 years of conquest, 300 years of dominance, 300 years of fear-based rule, all of it crumbling because they had underestimated a species they considered primitive. "Send a message to the human fleet," the Emperor said quietly. Tell them I wish to discuss terms." The words felt like poison in his mouth, but the alternative was the complete destruction of his people, and despite everything, Thekmor was still responsible for the millions of Kethmori citizens who had trusted in their empire's strength. As the message went out, carried by quantum communicators to the human fleet, the last phase of the empire's collapse began. Not with a glorious battle, but with a quiet admission that they had met their match at last. The age of Kethmori dominance was over. The question now was what would replace it. 6 months had passed since the battle at Kepler 442b, and the galaxy looked nothing like it had before. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the Yamato, watching the ships in orbit around the former Kethmori capital world. Where once only the massive dreadnoughts of the Empire had hung in space, now there was a diverse fleet of vessels from dozens of different species. Vectar cruisers with their distinctive insect-like design flew alongside sleek Zithron exploration ships. Even some of the mysterious crystalline vessels from Sigma Draconis had emerged from their hiding places to join the new alliance. And among them all, flying as equals rather than conquerors, were the ships of the former Kethmori Navy. "Admiral," Captain Rodriguez approached from the communication station. "President Martinez is ready to begin the ceremony." Chen nodded and made her way to the command center. On the main screen, she could see the surface of Kethmor Prime, far below. The massive imperial palace had been transformed into something unrecognizable. Where once the Emperor's throne room had dominated the structure with its symbols of conquest and domination, now there was a hospital treating refugees from across the galaxy. The palace gardens, which had been reserved for the Kethmori elite, were now home to thousands of beings from dozens of species, all living together in peace. The transformation had not been easy. When Emperor Thekmor had finally agreed to negotiate, the discussions had lasted for weeks. The humans had been firm but fair in their demands. Complete disarmament of the Kethmori military, the release of all prisoners and slaves, reparations for the damage caused by centuries of conquest, and most importantly, a fundamental change in how the Kethmori viewed their place in the galaxy. But the humans had also offered something unexpected: forgiveness and partnership. "Citizens of the galaxy," President Maria Martinez's voice carried across space to every inhabited world in the former empire. "Today we gather not to celebrate the defeat of an enemy, but to welcome new friends into the community of free worlds. On the planet's surface, in what had once been the Emperor's throne room, beings from 17 different species sat together at a circular table. There were no thrones here, no symbols of dominance, just equals working together to build something better than what had come before. Former Emperor Thekmor sat among them, no longer wearing the armor and decorations of imperial rule. He looked older now, smaller somehow, but there was something in his eyes that had not been there before. Peace, perhaps, or relief. The Terran Federation offers membership to any species that commits to 3 simple principles, President Martinez continued. The protection of individual rights for all sentient beings, the peaceful resolution of disputes through negotiation rather than force, and the sharing of knowledge and resources for the common good. One by one, the representatives of each species stood to formally join the new alliance. The insectoid Vectar, who had been among the first to rebel against Kethmori rule. The aquatic Zithran, whose homeworld was already showing signs of recovery after centuries of exploitation. The crystalline beings of Sigma Draconis, speaking in harmonious tones that translated as songs of hope. And finally, representing the Kethmori people, Thekmor himself rose to his feet. "I speak for my people," he said, his voice carrying none of the arrogance that had once defined the imperial court. "We ask forgiveness for the pain we have caused. We ask for the chance to prove that we can be better than we were." The chamber fell silent. For 300 years, the Kethmori had been the most feared species in the galaxy. Their name had been synonymous with conquest and oppression. Now their former emperor stood before his victims, asking for mercy. President Martinez stepped forward. The Terran Federation welcomes the Kethmori people as equal partners in building a better future. On the Yamato, Admiral Chen smiled as she watched the ceremony. It had been a long journey from that first desperate message from the human colonies, begging for rescue from their enslavers. The Terran Federation Navy had been created for exactly this purpose, to ensure that no species would ever again have to suffer under the boot of an oppressive empire. "Admiral," her communications officer called out, "we're receiving a priority message from Earth Command." "Put it through." The face of Admiral Thompson, head of Federation Navy Operations, appeared on the screen. His expression was serious. "Sarah, we've got a situation developing. Long-range sensors are detecting massive energy signatures from the direction of the Andromeda Galaxy. The patterns don't match any known technology." Chen felt a familiar chill. How massive? Large enough to power entire star systems. And they're moving in our direction. The Admiral looked out at the peaceful gathering of ships around Kethmor Prime, then back at the screen. "How long do we have?" "At current speed, maybe 18 months before they reach the outer rim of our galaxy." Chen nodded slowly. The galaxy had just finished healing from one threat. Now it seemed another was approaching. "Admiral," President Martinez's voice came over the communication channel from the planet below. "Is everything all right?" Chen made her decision quickly. "Madam President, I'm afraid I have some news that will need to be shared with our new allies." Within minutes, the celebration on the planet's surface had transformed into an emergency council meeting. Representatives from all the species looked up at the screens showing Admiral Chen aboard the Yamato. "Citizens of the Federation," she began, "we have detected approaching signals from another galaxy. We don't yet know if they represent a threat, but we must be prepared for any possibility." Former Emperor Thekmor was the first to speak. "Admiral, the Kethmori fleet, what remains of it, is at your disposal. We owe you our freedom. We will not forget that debt." Similar pledges came from around the table. Species that had been enemies just months before were now volunteering to stand together against an unknown threat. "This is exactly why the Federation exists," President Martinez declared. "Not to conquer or dominate, but to protect and defend. Whatever is coming from Andromeda, we will face it together." Admiral Chen felt a surge of pride as she looked down at the gathering. The Kethmori Empire had been built on fear and conquest. It had seemed mighty, but it had been brittle, collapsing the moment it faced a superior force. This new alliance was different. It was built on cooperation and mutual respect. It was flexible, adaptable, and most importantly, it was united by choice rather than force. All Federation vessels, this is Admiral Chen, she broadcast to the fleet. Prepare for departure to the Galactic Rim. We have work to do. As the diverse fleet began to move into formation, Chen thought about the journey that had brought them to this point. The Terran Federation had not set out to build an empire. They had simply wanted to protect their people and help others who suffered under oppression. But in doing so, they had created something far more powerful than any empire. A community of free beings working together for the common good. The Yamato led the fleet away from Kethmore Prime, heading for the edge of the galaxy, where unknown signals waited in the darkness between the stars. Behind them, the former capital of a fallen empire was already transforming into something new. The diplomatic center of an alliance built on hope rather than fear. Marcus Williams, the former slave who had worked in the mines of Kepler 442b, stood in the observation lounge of a transport ship, watching the fleet depart. His daughter Sarah, now a captain in the Federation Navy, commanded one of the escort vessels. They had been reunited after 50 years of separation, and both had chosen to serve the cause that had freed them. "Think they'll be able to handle whatever's coming from Andromeda?" asked Elena Rodriguez, the former captain of the Hermes, who now served as the Federation's diplomatic liaison. Marcus smiled, thinking of everything he had seen in the past 6 months. Enemies becoming friends, oppressors learning to serve rather than rule, and a galaxy full of different species choosing to work together instead of fighting each other. "Admiral Chen and her people liberated the entire galaxy in less than a year," he said. "I think they can handle whatever comes next." Far ahead of them, the Yamato and its escorts jumped to hyperspace, carrying the message that had brought down an empire and built a federation, that no matter how far tyranny might spread, there would always be those willing to stand against it. The Kethmori Empire had fallen because it relied on fear and superior force. The Terran Federation would endure because it was built on something far stronger. The simple idea that all beings had the right to be free, and the determination to make that right a reality throughout the galaxy. Whatever waited in the darkness, between the stars would find not a collection of conquered subjects but a united community, ready to defend the freedom they had fought so hard to achieve.